want to ask you what your favorite genre of movies are, but it's a very difficult question to ask somebody who grew up on Tamil cinema. We don't really have genres. All our movies are horror, romance, tragic, action. We're genre fluid, okay? So let me ask that question differently. What kind of scenes work best for you in Tamil movies? Some of us like to watch the laid-back romantic scenes, no dialogues, plot mechanics or suspense, just vibes. Others like rip ticklers, slapstick, observational, absurdist.
Hey, Sumara.
Few brave souls out there might even say farmers yelling at you kind of scenes are what they dig. But regardless of what works and what doesn't, Tamil cinema has a few staples.
Super. Thank you, sir. தக்காளி சட்னி ரொம்ப நல்லா இருக்குடா.
For example, there's your heroine being introduced so that she can later come back and dance and it won't feel out of place. There's almost always a comedy track, but a must in most movies, action sequences. No, not that kind. We don't have much of that. Action sequences are littered through our movies. They're usually high on budget, heavy on effects, and intense on hero worshipping. You can't help but let out a tiny whoa during war sequences in a movie. Or when Daredevil punches his way through a stairwell. When Neo dodges bullets like he's in a school dodgeball game. When Colin Firth sends a whole lot of churchgoers straight to heaven. Or when the bride, does that. But for all that hype and effort, it's when action sequences are happening that I check my messages. They're hardly able to hold attention. Take this action sequence. If I had to explain it in words, it would be something like, he punched the first guy, and then he punched another one. This time differently though. And then there was a new punch at two guys. And then, oh yeah, he kicked. Yeah, that's not the most interesting way to go about a scene, right? You see how much our movies worship the hero, you know for a fact that he's going to come out on top. There is no feeling of what will happen. Will our hero come out on top? It's because the idea behind the scene is to serve up the hero to be a demigod. The objective is not to drive plot forward, but rather establish character more. And even then, it's just one aspect of their character, super strength, because that's a sign of the ideal man, trademark. So much so that the action sequences we enjoy today are the ones where the hero shows vulnerability. Two scenes that I in fact enjoyed in recent times were ones that subverted from the idea of an omnipotent being. The hero is shown as vulnerable. The tension is palpable, and the resolution, realistic. Well, as realistic as it can get. But it's at the cost of replacing an action sequence entirely. So that's still not ideal.
Sorry,
Action sequences quite often are written because, well, it's been 20 minutes since the previous action sequence. They do not really help in serving a bigger purpose in the movie. Any problem that our protagonist solves cannot stand alone by itself. Most action sequences don't actually lend any value to the plot. They're speed breakers. You take them out and nothing happens to the plot. Realism flies out of the window. It's about sizing up our hero, and therefore these exaggerated feats become over the top, sometimes even comical. Lokesh Kanagaraj is clearly a man into action sequences, and they do work sometimes, like the one in Kaidi, because it establishes Dilli as someone with a dark past, and it gives him more reason to protect the cops. Or in Master, where the jail scene is not just a very well choreographed dance, but it begins with the impetus for JD's transformation. The anger, the rage, and response contributes to the path the movie takes. But, why is there always a but? But despite the setup working well, the scene as such is tiring to say the least. Most action sequences are just testosterone tributes. Mix it up with this sudden new need to have a mass interval block and... Until I saw the scene from Uriyadi. Let me set some context. The first time I watched this scene, I have to clarify over here because of how often I've rewatched this. The first time I watched this scene, I was dumbstruck. Uriyadi is the story of 4 college-goers, wastrels, angry people, whatever you want to call them. Get tangled up in local caste feuds, and what happens makes the plot of the movie. It begins rather okayishly. There seems to be the quintessential doing-nothing heroine plot point that started off, and I was beginning to lose interest when suddenly the movie shifts gears. There are the 4 college kids. There's the affluent stoner problem creator from college, a cunning dhaba owner, local political bodies, all with their own individual goals. All this tension in the first half builds up to a, well, you guessed it, a mass interval block action sequence. But this one, it hits different. For starters, the scene is meshed into the plot that it does not seem like a distraction. The heat is rising in the locality and the boys are getting angry. The dhaba owner is still cunning and the stoner wants revenge. All these meet at this point in the story. Stoner Dickhead wants to take revenge on the boys, especially Mr. Teensy here. He is sending men to have them killed, so the scene needs to show how serious and brutal our villain can be. Beyond that, this is a scene where the four boys decide they've had enough, that they're going to fight back whenever hit, but they're not going to take this sitting down quietly. A sentiment that continues to resonate here on from the film, bringing them more into the center of the cast feud. And well, Mr. I don't want anything to do with this doesn't want anything to do with it, but the battleground is his daba, so yay for the relevance factor. Beyond that, individually, this is just a brilliant scene that builds suspense and tension. We don't know what character knows what. With every dialogue, a new layer of information is revealed, and we realize things as the character does. The information mismatch between the characters in the scene and the audience builds the tension. As the dialogues transpire and the scene marinates, the tension, you can almost cut it with a knife. We don't know who's going to come out on top. And then the scene explodes, which brings me to the final point, the actual fight. It's brutal, it's clumsy, it's confusing, it's not over the top, people stumble, miss, hit objects, it's realistic. It's not about hyping any one of these four boys up. It's about throwing them into a situation and seeing how they get out, which is as real as it's gonna get. And add some masala coffee, well, you have. Meaning, good writing and with realistic choreography, action sequences aren't speed breakers anymore.